Hi, I'm Joe with JTV. Today we're going to be talking about what makes pearls special and the different varieties. And we grade pearls on a variety of factors. The most important is size, then there's shape, then there's color, then there is what we call skin purity or the lack of imperfections on the outside of the oyster, and finally luster. How bright, how alive is the color play in a pearl. And when we factor all these things in, it's really, really, really rare to get one pearl that matches all of these criteria. And again, we're going to talk about rarity. So we have 3 oysters, Pinctada maxima white lip from Australia, Pinctada margaritifera from Tahiti, and Pinctada maxima gold lip from the Philippines. So now let's talk about some color issues with pearls. You know, color is kind of subjective to some folks. What I might like, what you might like, might be 2 different things. But one thing we can agree on, a beautiful color really enhances the experience of owning and loving pearls. So let's talk about the different species that we've already been referencing, one of which is, of course, the Australian white. That's pretty basic. So white pearls, either from Australia or Iroquois, or even freshwater, they're going to have basically a body color with a secondary color undertone. So it could be a white pearl with silver undertone, it could be a white pearl with rosé, or it could be a pearl with cream. These are the basic 3 colors that we see in these oysters. Sometimes the silver is really prominent, sometimes the rosé is really prominent, but it all depends on the conditions of the water, the oyster itself, and when it was harvested. In Tahitians, though, Tahitians are really interesting because they have a complete palette of colors ranging from a platinum, white silvery color to a deep rich black with a peacock effect, which you can think of it kind of like a rainbow almost painted over the top of the oyster. I should say the pearl. I get those 2 mixed up all the time because they're so tied to one another. And the thing is, the oysters paint with nacre. So every layer that's deposited over that nucleus is a different color combination until the final layer of nacre is at the point of harvest. Imagine this, every oyster that's harvested is still producing nacre up to the moment that it's taken from the oyster. That pearl is still being covered with nacre. And that's what's so fascinating. The final look of that pearl is determined by when it was harvested. And that's what makes them so magical. But in the case of Tahitians, we were talking about that before, you have these beautiful colors, and then the colors are again affected by the layering and layering of nacre as the oyster deposits that. Bear in mind too, the oyster's doing a lot of work here because it takes a lot of energy to create a pearl. So they're living their lives, they're feeding, they're spawning, and they're making pearl at the same time. So we're grateful to the oyster for the amount of energy and time it takes to create a pearl. A lot of folks don't think about that, but it's a living creature and it's doing something really special so that we can enjoy for years and years the product of its color. Because of very strict controls by the Tahitian and French Polynesian government, they are never treated. As they come out of the oyster is how you see them. So when you see them, you have a great confidence that they are as beautiful as nature intended. One thing about Tahitians that's really interesting is that unlike other types of oysters, they have a lot of melanin in the shell, which means that you can't pass light through them. Give me a second, I'll show you something. You'll notice that when I put light behind the pearl, it doesn't really penetrate or pass through it. But uniquely and more excitedly, in the golden South Sea pearl world, you can tell the quality of the color by how light passes through it and it glows orange. Take a look at that. Look how vivid the orange is in this pearl. That tells you it's high quality and it's a genuine golden pearl. Frankly, that's the only pearl you can do that with. If I put light through a white pearl, it just shows more white. So that's not really all that interesting. But the goldens are rare that way to be able to do that. Let's talk about the Philippine golden South Sea pearl. This is an interesting story. In the early days, around 1979 and forward, the first pearls that were harvested in the Philippines were just harvested for being pearls. They were Pinctada maxima gold lip, but they were wild. And so what came out of these oysters were basically sometimes a whitish color, sometimes a champagne color, every now and then a gold color. And the farmer said, oh, wait a minute. Let's see if we can get these oysters that produce the gold colors to mate with other oysters that produce a gold color so we can keep enhancing that genetic trait to create gold. So they started a breeding program, just like you would say breed fine thoroughbred horses, and they created a genealogy of oysters that reinforced the gold color over and over again. And that became what we now know as the golden South Sea pearl. Now, there are other regions that produce this oyster: Indonesia, Myanmar, as we call Burma, many other places around that specific area of the South Seas. But the real pioneers, if you will, were in the Philippines. And they were the ones that really figured out, those farmers, how to reinforce the color of these oysters by breeding. In the case of Goldens, you're going to have champagne to deep, rich, metallic gold. Here's a strand of Goldens. We were looking at this one before. Gorgeous color. I mean, really intense. But I'll tell you a secret. This pearl that I proudly wear every day, this pearl is about as good as they get with respect to color and how metallic the pearl appears. It's almost like we have nature's alchemy. So we're taking oysters, people, the water and food of the region and turning it into these golden South Sea pearls. Magnificent. And again, the rarest of the three kinds. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll mix different varieties of pearls and different colors of pearls to create a really beautiful multicolor effect. And the one thing you need to know about that is oysters paint with nacre, but the folks who string them have to be just as much of an artist because they're going to combine colors that are pleasing to one another and reflect the beauty of each of those pearls without standing out too much, but overall creates a gorgeous effect. So when we look at this Tahitian and Golden strand, this is a 10 to 11 millimeter strand, and look at how beautifully combined these are. That takes a skilled and practiced eye. Sorting pearls is really an art form too, but it only comes with years and years of experience. And sometimes what looks really simple and what looks really ordinary took a lot of time to do. And so when we show you multicolor strands, remember, an artist created that multicolor effect. And you might say to yourself, well, could I wear this anyway? Meaning, could I wear it with this color? Could I wear it with any color in my wardrobe? Absolutely. That's part of why the multicolor is so special and so prized, because it accommodates all of your wardrobe and all of your moods. So if you're in a playful mood, multicolor strand is for you. So here's an illustration of luster. So luster is, in common words, how shiny is the pearl? One way we tell right away is we'll put our fingernail against the pearl, and if we get a clean, crisp reflection of our nail, we know it's a high luster pearl. Also, we can look at lighting. So if the lights in the pearl are as crisp and clean as we can see in a mirror, then we know it's high luster. And again, that's a grade of really okay to beautifully perfect. A lot of times that's just a judgment call, but you can tell right away a high luster pearl by how really crisp the reflections of everything around it is. Sometimes it looks like just a plain old mirror that's showing every light source that it comes into contact with. So the next aspect is going to be skin purity. Now I know that's kind of an unusual thing to hear, but skin is the outside surface of the pearl. As I was talking to you before about the very final coating of nacre, that as we harvest it, that oyster was still putting that nacre on. Wait, I've got one more layer, wait, but now we've harvested. So the final result is that pearl. And you're going to see pretty much spoken about in terms of 100%, meaning that there isn't anything on the pearl. There aren't any surface blemishes, there aren't any circulate imperfections. It's just clear. We call that a clean pearl. But most of the time, there's going to be a little bit of something on the pearl because, like us, we're not perfect. And that actually gives a little bit of character to the pearl, which I enjoy. So they become yours. When you notice and you study each pearl in your strand, you'll see little indications of how the pearl was formed, because all of the skin of the pearl tells a story about what the oyster was doing at the time. Sometimes, if a large wave hits the oyster, it can change the shape of the pearl. Sometimes if the oyster was left in a position for too long, it'll change the shape of the pearl. Sometimes, my goodness, what the oyster eats changes the color of the pearl. So all these factors come together, but skin purity is generally something that your eye picks up very quickly, and you can tell right away if you've got a really fine pearl, but most of them are really nice anyway, or a pearl that has a little bit more imperfections on the skin. That does not mean it's not a beautiful pearl. That does not mean it's not worth owning. It simply means that that's the individual characteristic of that pearl. That's that pearl's fingerprint, and it's unique to it. And in a whole strand, you could spend years enjoying your strand, just looking at each pearl and each imperfection, each little nuance that makes that strand yours.